Please bring the Chief Justice and the Associate Justices to the rostrum. You may be seated. We have several honored guests today. Please welcome the family of the Chief Justice, her husband Mark, and her extended family. Please stand and be recognized. We also have one of our constitutional officers here. Please welcome the Insurance Commissioner, the Honorable Dave Jones. We also welcome the other elected officials and guests from the legal community, the Judicial Council, and those present for the Bench Bar Coalition's Day in Sacramento. It is now my pleasure to introduce the President Pro Tem of the California State Senate, the Honorable Kevin De Leon.
Thank you so very much. Good afternoon, colleagues from both the Assembly as well as the Senate. To my friend and my colleague, Assembly Speaker Anthony Rendon, thank you very much for hosting us once again here in your incredible, wonderful chamber. And I want to welcome all of our distinguished guests, family, as well as friends. Colleagues, an independent judiciary is critical in preserving a free and democratic society. Protecting fair and impartial courts is more important than ever. Those in the executive and legislative branches of government who fail to respect the courts and honor judicial decisions do a great disservice to our nation. Without a fully functioning and independent judiciary, our entire system of government is threatened. Former Associate Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor reminded us back in 2008 that judicial independence is hard to create, yet easier than most people imagine to destroy. With that, it's a great pleasure for me to introduce our Associate Justices, Ming Chin, Carol Corrigan, Goodwin Liu, Leandra Kruger, and he's not with us today, but I want to recognize Mariano Florentino Cuellar, who's not with us today. And last but not least, colleagues, it is my honor to introduce our Chief Justice of California Supreme Court, the Honorable Tani Cantil-Sakauye.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Speaker Rendon and President Pro Tem De Leon, for inviting me to address this joint session of the legislature on the state of the judiciary. I'm proud to be here with my colleagues from the judicial branch, justices, judges, commissioners, attorneys, lawyers, staff, and also, of course, the legal community. Those of you who were here today and visited legislative offices, would you please stand? Thank you for your service on behalf of the judicial branch. I'm also grateful that some of my beloved family is here tonight, as been stated, my husband Mark and my in-laws Jiro and Dorothy. For the first time, my mother, Mary Cantil, is unable to attend, but I'll show her the YouTube video and the tweets later. I love you, Mom. Thank you. Before I begin, I'd like to take a moment to reflect and to give thanks for all that we have accomplished together. As I observe the harsh rhetoric on the national stage, I am grateful for the leadership in California of our three branches of government and our conscious civility as we navigated the Great Recession and beyond. It is true, we will always have challenges, but California survives and thrives because of our collective wisdom, unwavering will, and our mutual commitment to the rule of law. It hasn't always been easy. Before you renewed investment in the judicial branch, during the budget crunch years, the criminal justice system was reformed, and additional work fell upon the courts to absorb by those changes. It was during the budget crunch years that those reforms unwound decades of laws passed by previous legislatures and signed by previous governors. It was during those budget crunch years that California's priorities and policies changed, and the courts were tasked with interpreting and implementing those changes, and we did so, for example, by processing hundreds of thousands of new filings for resentencing. And this has affected and continues to affect every level of court. And as you know, we used our limited resources and focused it on criminal matters, not only because the Constitution and the statutes mandate that focus, but because individual liberties were at stake. And now, years later, after renewed investment in the judicial branch, thanks to you and thanks to the governor, we've had the opportunity to step back and study the needs of our court users and the future of justice in California. And we first turned to the needs of those court users who are indigent and accused. And it is in that situation we asked, is money bail safe and is it even fair? And so the answer lies in our pretrial detention report, a report that has the echoes of history from 1964, when then Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy gave congressional testimony. And he said about the money bail system then that it is a vehicle for systematic injustice. And he said it is cruel and the cost of that system is needless. Now I'm going to tell you in 1964 that was pretty strong language. And I will submit to you that in 2018 it is a clarion call for justice. Our report was delivered by an intentionally selected diverse group of judges and a CEO. And by diverse, I mean men and women, people of color, judges with many years of experience, judges with only a few, judges who came from rural and urban counties, and judges who came from small and large counties. We had a judge on this work group who was a former deputy district attorney. We had a judge on this work group who was a former deputy public defender. We had a judge on this work group who was a former cop. Now I smile because it appears to be a recipe for disaster, except that I have faith and continue to have faith in the dedicated professionals, men and women in our branch, who with our shared DNA will deliberate in a fair and just manner. And I'm told at the first meeting, this group agreed on nothing. But after a year's worth of study and public meetings, I'm proud to say that they delivered a unanimous report with 10 recommendations. 10 recommendations taken as a whole, not parts, reflect a fairer, safer justice system. Now, after the bail study, we turned to the future of justice in California, and I formed the Futures Commission. It consisted of court users, court employees, lawyers, judges, and I asked them to question the past, present, and future, and to make recommendations for how we go forward in the future with justice in California. And at the time, we were concerned with two major forces. The first was income inequality, because we knew that at the time when the branch was losing resources, income inequality in California was on the rise. In fact, the Public Policy Institute of California reports that of the poorest Californians, their incomes dropped by nearly 25%, and those incomes have not recovered since the Great Recession. The other major force we were concerned about in the Futures Commission was what to do and how to approach the profile of the new court user. So in today's day and age, when online you can order groceries and your dinner within hours to your doorstep, and when retail and entertainment is on demand, and we have a 24-hour news cycle, how do we provide access and fairness to Generation Z? Well, the Futures Commission, with 64 members strong, led by the indomitable duo of Supreme Court Justice Carol Corrigan and now retired Justice Bill McGinnis from the Appellate District 1st DCA, with 64 members strong, 2 years of volunteer work, delivered thoughtful, sobering, and innovative recommendations. And I am gratified that the governor's strong proposed budget for the judicial branch references 3 of those futures recommendations. And the first is $19 million to expand self-represented litigant services for those who come to court without an attorney. In California, we know that over 4 million Californians come to court without an attorney. And we know that in civil cases, in 3/4 of civil cases, at least one side doesn't have an attorney. And our self-help program serves at least 1 million people a year. And our self-help website receives 4.3 million unique visits every year. So the need for self-help is really undeniable. And second, the governor proposes, and we support, $3.4 million for our efforts to initiate a tech-based traffic system. In fact, one that could lead to, in fact, decriminalizing minor traffic infractions and making life simpler for everyone. Because if you're gonna pay that ticket anyway, you might as well do it online. And third, the governor proposes, and we support, $4 million for language access in civil matters. Now, the bail study, the bail study and the futures recommendation are forward-looking. But what's especially forward-looking is another $123 million proposed in the governor's budget for the trial courts. This will allow the trial courts the needed flexibility to restore services they regrettably reduced. Few of us need to be reminded that in the Great Recession, civil cases took a backseat to criminal cases. And for many courts, civil dockets were and continue to be greatly delayed. And so this additional money would help courts help those who were unfortunately left behind, those seeking civil justice. And as you know, civil justice encompasses wide and complicated bodies of law like constitutional law and environmental law and consumer law and health and welfare across the board. And it focuses on claims in personal injury, claims for discrimination, retaliation, misconduct, lost jobs, and many, many more. And who was left behind? Well, children and elders, veterans, businesses, our neighbors, your relatives, our constituents were left behind. And I know that everyone in this room is committed to providing a timely and fair, accessible day in court for our constituents. And this money will provide an opportunity for courts to help and have and resolve cases in a timelier manner in the civil arena. And this is important because what we know is there's an onslaught of cases waiting to be filed. With the fires alone, we're informed that our residents have filed more than 45,000 insurance claims, totaling more than $12 billion, concerning 32,000 homes and 4,000 businesses. And so knowing that in California we have had a historical delay in our civil justice arena, and in the anticipation of new cases, I think it's only time, and it's really fair at this point, to announce and focus on a 3-tiered civil justice reform initiative. And the first tier of the civil justice reform initiative should be that we restore courthouses to their full operating hours and staff. Thank you. And that we provide fair compensation to our court family. And also, as a second part of this tier, I suggest that we embrace the 3 recommendations that are highlighted in the governor's proposed budget, which is to provide additional funding for self-represented litigants, technology and traffic, and language access. And third, I think we should work collectively to develop and employ a group of people called, for lack of a better term, legal wayfinders, who could personally assist people who come to court without an attorney. We know that we could work together and also find best practices and draw on the work of our self-help programs and our excellent volunteer Justice Corps folks who are used now in Los Angeles, San Diego, and the Bay Area. So what could legal wayfinders do? Well, legal wayfinders can meet people and guide them to the appropriate window, appropriate room, courtroom, appropriate courthouse. A legal wayfinder could explain the options and the consequences and the procedures and find the right form and actually help the person fill out the form and get it filed in the right place. A legal wayfinder could provide referrals for services, not only in the courtroom, but out in the community. A legal wayfinder could do this on a one-on-one basis or in a workshop setting. And we have examples from which to draw. For example, a Justice Corps volunteer, the daughter of Mexican immigrants, tells us that in her job, she helps women in her community obtain domestic violence restraining orders, and she helps tenants who are near eviction. A self-help attorney in Alameda tells us that she helps people who are 1 day away from homelessness. Another attorney tells us that we can't stress enough the value of self-help because it provides the best possible outcome for all litigants, and it helps keep the courts running effectively. Because if the paperwork isn't filled out properly, it only results in delays. So, in closing, I know all of us here support a fair and accessible justice system, and our residents deserve that. And it's only natural that California be the leader in this regard. On the national front, we have unprecedented disruption, attacks on the free press, threats to the rule of civility, the rule of law, and judicial independence. But fortunately, our founders focused much on the limits of power in the Constitution when they constructed the 3 branches of government, the checks and balances, as well as adopting the Bill of Rights, and building a federal system that still recognizes the rights of states to govern some of their own business. We know that in California, California's right to govern its own affairs is now being litigated in federal court. So it's only natural that nationally, the Law Day theme this year is Separation of Powers Framework for Freedom. Our governor said in his State of the State that for California, we persevere, and the bolder way is still our way forward. And so I ask you to help together to stay on the bold path and provide for a fair, accessible justice system. Thank you for your attention.